Somewhere in the distance, a clock marks another hour. But here, time moves differently, measured in tasks completed, in the steady pull of routine. Tonight, we follow someone through the late hours of the Roundtable Hold. Settle into the stillness. Let your bed hold you softly. Let your thoughts grow quiet and distant. Let the last of your effort melt away. This is canon and calm. Let us begin. The central chamber of the Roundtable Hold remains a place of refuge, even when the rest of the lands between are lost to chaos. Here, the golden light of the grace serves as our only clock, its soft radiance ebbing and flowing like a slow tide. I move through the stillness, my footsteps echoing faintly against the vaulted ceiling. My first duty of the evening involves the great hearth, where the embers have started to fade into a dull orange glow. I lift a single thick log of rowan wood, feeling the rough texture of the bark against my palms. It slides into the grate with a dry scrape, and soon a small flame stirs into life, licking at the dry wood. The warmth from the fire spreads across the stone floor, reaching toward the empty chairs where heroes often sit to rest their weary bones. I take a moment to adjust the iron poker, leaning it carefully against the soot-stained bricks. The heat is a welcome companion in this isolated sanctuary, standing firm against the chill that creeps in from the unseen corners. I walk toward the long table, the one carved with the maps of a divided land, and run my fingers over the deep grooves in the wood. Each mark represents a journey, a struggle, or a fallen warrior who once called this place home. The surface is smooth from the touch of 1,000 hands, polished by the friction of hope and desperation alike. In the library, the atmosphere is thick with the scent of old parchment and the faint metallic tang of ink. Sir Gideon remains hunched over his desk, his presence marked only by the scratch of a quill and the steady, low flicker of a candle. I move quietly, ensuring the stacks of books are aligned and that no loose pages drift onto the cold floor. There is a specific weight to the silence here, a density that seems to absorb the very idea of noise. I find a stray volume of lineage records and slide it back into its slot, the leather binding rubbing softly against its neighbors. The dust motes dance in the candlelight, swirling in lazy patterns that mirror the slow thoughts of the scholars who labor here. Moving toward the balcony, I look out over the edge, into the measureless expanse that surrounds our sanctuary. The Erd tree looms in the distance, its golden boughs shimmering with a light that feels both eternal and fragile. The wind does not reach us here, yet the sight of those glowing branches suggests a gentle celestial motion. I check the hinges of the great doors, applying a small drop of oil to the iron joints to ensure they operate without a groan. Maintenance is a quiet form of devotion, a way to keep the world outside from intruding upon the peace of those within. The metal feels cold, a stark contrast to the warmth of the central fire I left behind. Near the blacksmith's forge, the smell of coal and burnt iron dominates the senses, even in the absence of the hammer. Master Hugh is still, his large form silhouetted against the dying coals of his furnace. I place a fresh bucket of water near his workstation, the liquid sloshing gently against the wooden sides with a clean, clear tone. The anvil sits in the middle of the room, a massive block of iron that has shaped the fate of many a Tarnished. I wipe a layer of fine grey soot from its face, revealing the scarred and beaten metal beneath. It is a tool of creation and destruction, resting now in the quiet hours before the morning labor resumes. I pass by the room where the young woman tunes her spirit-calling bells, noting the soft glint of silver in the dimness. She is resting now, her tools laid out with a precision that speaks of a growing confidence. I make sure her door is latched, protecting the delicate transition from girlhood to the craft of the dead. In the lower levels, the stone walls are damp, holding a chill that the central grace cannot reach. I carry a small lantern, its light casting long, distorted shadows that dance across the masonry. My task here is simple: to ensure the seals remain intact and that the silence of the basement is not disturbed. I find a discarded whetstone near the training area and pick it up, feeling its grainy texture between my thumb and forefinger. Someone was practicing their edge here recently, leaving behind the faint scent of sharpening oil and steel. I place the stone on a nearby rack, returning it to its rightful place among the tools of war. The hallway leading to the finger reader is lined with tapestries that depict the age before the shattering. Their colors have faded into muted browns and golds, but the stories they tell still hold a certain gravity. I straighten a corner of the fabric, feeling the weave of the cloth beneath my fingertips, a physical link to a storied past. Enia is motionless, her tall frame draped in robes that seem to have become part of the architecture itself. The incense burner beside her has gone out, and I carefully relight it, watching the thin ribbon of smoke rise toward the ceiling. The aroma is pungent and sweet, a scent that speaks of divinity and decay in equal measure. I return to the main hall, where the light of the grace has shifted slightly, casting new patterns across the floor. This cycle of checking and tending is the pulse of the hold, a necessary measure to keep the shadows at bay. Every lock, every fire, and every book is a part of the greater whole that sustains us. I sit for a moment on a stone bench, watching the way the light reflects off the polished armor of a decorative suit. The metal is pristine, reflecting a distorted version of the room back at me. It is a reminder of the standard we must maintain, the vigilance required to keep this refuge standing against the tide. As the night progresses, the stillness deepens, becoming a presence that one can almost touch. I take a final walk through the kitchens, ensuring the stores are secure and the water barrels are full. The wooden planks of the floor creak under my weight, a familiar noise that feels like a conversation with the building itself. I reach the balcony once more, looking up at the Erd tree as the golden light begins to soften into a pale amber. The shift is nearly over, and the first stirrings of the morning will soon bring the noise of the living back to these halls. For now, however, the peace remains unbroken, a fragile gift held within these time-worn walls. I leave my lantern by the door and take one last look at the central fire, which is now a bed of glowing coals. The warmth persists, a lingering reminder of the work done in the quiet hours. I step into the side chamber to rest, leaving the hold in the capable hands of the light that never truly fades. The rest is brief, but the duty remains, pulling me back into the quiet corridors of the hold. My boots make a dull, muffled thud against the stone, a tempo that marks the passage of these stagnant hours. I move toward the library, where the knowledge of the lands between is stored in leather and ink. The atmosphere here is cooler, smelling of old parchment and the faint, bitter tang of dried herbs. Rows of shelves stretch upward, disappearing into the dimness of the high ceiling. I run my hand along the spines of the books, feeling the variation in texture from smooth vellum to rough, embossed leather. Each volume is a weight of history, a silent testament to the scholars who once sought to understand the grace. I find a tome that has slipped forward and nudge it back into its slot, ensuring the line remains unbroken. On a nearby desk, a single candle has burned down to a pool of hardened wax, its wick a charred curl. I scrape away the excess with a small knife, the metal clicking softly against the wood. It is a small thing, a minor correction in a place of grand designs, but it is necessary. Order must be maintained, even in the smallest details, to keep the chaos of the outside from seeping in. I look out over the central chamber from the upper balcony, observing the way the golden light of the grace interacts with the shadows. The patterns are ever-changing, a slow dance of radiance and murk that plays across the floor. Below, the great fireplace is a glowing eye in the dimness, its heat a faint pulse that reaches even up here. I lean against the stone railing, feeling the chill of the masonry seep through my sleeves. The blacksmith's corner is quiet now, the hammer and anvil resting in the absence of their master. I walk past the forge, where the scent of cold iron and soot is most potent. A pile of metal shavings lies on the floor, glinting like tiny jewels in the half-light. I sweep them into a small pile with my boot, a tidy gesture for the man who works so tirelessly during the day. In the hallway leading to the inner chambers, the silence is more profound, a thick layer that seems to swallow any noise I make. I check the doors, ensuring each one is latched, their iron handles cold and unyielding. There is a sense of preservation here, as if the hold itself is holding its breath, waiting for the next Tarnished to arrive. I adjust the hang of a heavy curtain, feeling the weighted fabric fall back into its natural folds. A map of the known lands is spread across a table in the study, its edges curled and yellowed. I trace the lines of the roads and the outlines of the great fortresses, imagining the travel and the toil they represent. A small inkwell sits nearby, its contents dried to a dark crust at the bottom. I place a lid over it, a simple act to protect what little remains of the scribe's tools. The stairs leading down to the lower level are steep and narrow, their edges worn smooth by countless footsteps. I descend slowly, my hand grazing the wall for balance, feeling the rough-hewn stone beneath my palm. The light becomes dimmer here, the golden glow of the grace replaced by a more subterranean gloom. I reach the bottom and pause, listening to the distant, measured drip of water from a hidden pipe. This lower hall is where the more somber duties reside, away from the warmth of the central fire. I check the stores of wood and oil, making sure we have enough to last through the coming shifts. The barrels are sturdy, their iron hoops rusted, but still holding firm against the dampness. I mark the inventory in my mind, a mental list of what needs to be replenished when the merchants return. I find a small alcove where a statue of a forgotten figure stands, its features blurred by time and neglect. I wipe a layer of dust from its shoulder, revealing a glimpse of the fine craftsmanship that went into its creation. It is a lonely task, tending to the memories of those who no longer have names. Yet in this place, memory is a form of currency, a way to keep the past from being entirely erased. The scent of the sea occasionally drifts through the ventilation shafts, a salty reminder of the world beyond these walls. It mingles with the smell of stone and old wood, creating a complex bouquet that defines the character of the hold. I take a deep breath, letting the mixture fill my lungs, a sensory anchor in the midst of the evening. The stillness is not empty. It is full of the echoes of everything that has happened here. I return to the main hall, my circuit nearly complete for this hour. The fire has burned lower, the coals glowing with a deep inner intensity that seems to pulse like a heart. I add a few logs to the hearth, watching as the flames lick at the dry wood, crackling with new life. The warmth spreads outward, a gentle wave that pushes back the chill of the surrounding stone. I sit on the edge of the hearth for a moment, letting the heat soak into my bones. The task of the watch is not just about security, it is about stewardship, about being the one who keeps the lights burning. As long as someone is awake, the hold remains a sanctuary, a beacon in the shifting tides of the lands between. I look up at the high, vaulted ceiling, where the shadows move in response to the rising flames. The night is long, but it is not a burden. It is a space for reflection and quiet work. I pick up a discarded piece of cloth and begin to polish the brass fittings on a nearby chest. The metal begins to shine, reflecting the orange light of the fire in a series of bright, dancing glints. It is a satisfying process, the transformation of something dull into something bright. I hear the faint, metallic scrape of someone moving in a distant room, a reminder that I am not entirely alone. It is a comforting noise, a sign of life in the midst of the architectural silence. I do not go to investigate knowing that the other residents have their own patterns and needs. We are all part of this machine, each playing a role in the preservation of our shared refuge. The light of the Erd tree outside the windows is a constant, a pale gold that never truly fades. It casts a soft, ethereal glow over the landscape, making the ruins in the distance look like ghosts. I watch the way the mist rolls across the plains, a slow-moving ocean of white that hides the dangers of the path. From up here, the setting seems peaceful, a deceptive calm that masks the struggle below. I check the locks on the main entrance one last time, feeling the solid click of the bolts as they slide into place. The wood is thick and reinforced with iron, a barrier that has stood against many attempts at entry. It feels reliable, a physical manifestation of the safety we provide to those who seek shelter here. I lean my forehead against the cool timber, listening to the wind howl outside. The shift continues, and I find myself drawn back to the library once more, the pull of the books irresistible. I spend some time organizing the scrolls that have been left in a haphazard pile on a side table. Each one is a delicate thing, the parchment brittle and prone to tearing if handled roughly. I roll them carefully, securing them with thin strips of leather, a task that requires patience and a steady hand. The silence of the hold is a living thing, a presence that grows and changes as the hours pass. It is a different kind of quiet than the one found in the open fields or the deep forests. Here the silence is layered with the history of the building and the intent of its inhabitants. It is a thick, purposeful stillness that demands respect and a measured pace. I prepare for the next phase of my watch, knowing that the transition to the early morning is approaching. The tasks will change as the first light begins to filter through the high windows, but the core of the duty remains the same. I pick up my lantern, its flame a steady, reliable companion in the dimness. There is more to be done, more secrets to keep, and more halls to walk before my time is through. I descend the narrow stairs toward the lower balcony where the atmosphere grows colder and the dampness of the stone clings to the walls. It is a reminder of the depths beneath this sanctuary, a place where the foundations meet the roots of the earth. My boots make a soft, muffled thud on the masonry as I step into the open space, the echo swallowed by the high, vaulted ceilings. In the corner, the sorcerer remains in his usual spot, his head bowed in a state of deep contemplation, or perhaps a dreamless sleep. A single candle flickers beside him, casting long, wearing shadows against the curved archway and the piles of discarded books. I do not speak, for the quiet of the late hour is a fragile thing that deserves protection from the intrusion of a human voice. I notice a few empty glass vials near the edge of the stone railing, likely left behind during a moment of intense study or desperate experimentation. I pick them up one by one, feeling the smooth, cold glass against my palm, the remnants of blue liquid staining the bottoms. They clink together with a delicate musical tone as I place them into my leather satchel for cleaning later. Moving away from the balcony, I head toward the storage pantry located behind the main kitchen area, where the supplies are kept. The scent here changes, shifting from the metallic tang of the forge to the earthy aroma of dried roots and salted meats. Bundles of herbs hang from the ceiling, swaying slightly in the gentle draught that wanders through the halls like a ghost. I spend several minutes rearranging the ceramic jars on the shelves, ensuring the labels face outward for the morning cooks who will soon arrive. The surface of the jars is rough and unglazed, providing a tactile contrast to the polished wood of the storage tables. It is a simple task, yet it provides a necessary order to the chaos of daily survival in this landscape. From the hallway beyond, a low, pulsing hum emanates from the chamber where the two fingers reside, a vibration that never truly ceases. It is not a noise one hears with the ears, but rather a sensation felt in the marrow of the bone, a deep and steady thrum. I pause, letting the sensation wash over me, a reminder of the power that anchors this place to the higher planes. The main hall is empty now, the great table standing like a silent monolith in the center of the room, surrounded by empty chairs. I take a damp cloth and begin to wipe away the dust that has gathered on the outer rim of the wood. The timber is age-old and scarred by the weapons of 1,000 warriors, each mark a story I will never fully know or understand. I move toward the fireplace, where the logs have burned down to a pile of glowing orange embers that cast a dim light. The warmth is still present, a comforting shield against the chill that seeps in from the high windows and the stone floors. I use a long iron poker to stir the coals, watching as a cloud of tiny sparks rises into the chimney like miniature stars. I add a fresh piece of oak to the pile, a weighted log that will burn steadily until the transition to the early morning. The wood catches slowly, the first small flames licking at the bark with a soft, persistent hiss as the moisture evaporates. It is a peaceful sight, the birth of a new fire in the heart of the evening, providing light for the weary. Above the hearth, the portraits of the former champions look down with sightless eyes, their features blurred by time and the layers of grime. I wonder if they ever felt the same sense of duty I feel now, standing guard over the remnants of their storied legacy. The paint is cracked and peeling, yet the dignity of their poses remains intact, a silent testament to their past glory. The path leads me toward the smithy, where the forge has finally cooled to a dull charcoal grey after hours of intense heat. Master Hugh is motionless, his massive form hunched over the anvil as if in prayer or a state of profound exhaustion. I do not disturb his rest, knowing the immense labor he performs when the sun is high and the blades need sharpening. I take a small broom and begin to sweep the metal shavings from the floor, the gritty scrape echoing in the confined space of the workshop. The floor is stained with oil and soot, a testament to the endless cycle of creation and destruction that happens within these walls. Each flake of iron is a piece of a weapon that may one day change the fate of this universe. The smell of sulfur persists here, clinging to the stone walls like a phantom of the day's work and the heat of the hammer. I find a stray whetstone on the floor and place it back on the workbench, its surface worn smooth by years of constant use. The order I bring to this workspace is a quiet gift to the smith for his morning return to the anvil. A sudden draught whistles through a gap in the masonry, causing the tapestries on the far wall to ripple and dance in the dimness. I walk over to inspect the hanging, finding that one of the iron rings has slipped from its hook, leaving the fabric bunched. The material is dense and laden with the dust of decades, requiring both hands to lift it back into its proper place. The embroidery depicts the great tree in its full golden glory, a sprawling image of life and light that dominates the entire room. I run my fingers over the threads, feeling the intricate texture of the needlework and the skill of the long-forgotten weaver. It is a beautiful, archaic piece of art that has survived the decay and the wars of the surrounding world. I turn back toward the central corridors, my lantern casting a wide circle of yellow light on the grey flagstones of the floor. The murk of the quiet hours seems to thicken as I move away from the fire, the shadows stretching to meet me at every turn. I walk with a measured pace, my senses tuned to the subtle shifts in the atmosphere and the creak of the building. I find myself near the entrance to the lower levels, where the stairs descend into a deeper, more profound stillness that feels heavy. I do not go down there tonight, for my watch is confined to the upper halls and the common areas of the refuge. Instead, I check the tension of the ropes that hold the great chandelier, ensuring they are secure for the coming day. The hemp is thick and rough, the fibers biting slightly into my skin as I test the strength of the knots and the pulleys. It is a physical reassurance of the stability of our home, a small detail that prevents a larger disaster from occurring in the dark. I take a breath of the ambient warmth, feeling the pulse of the building beneath my feet as I work. Through a narrow window I see the pale gold of the Erd tree shimmering in the distance, a beacon that never truly sleeps or fades. The mist below is a measureless sea of white, hiding the broken roads and the wandering spirits that haunt the plains of the realm. From this height, the struggles of the land seem distant and manageable, a quiet perspective on the grand design. I prepare to move toward the upper chambers, where the light of the morning will first appear through the stained glass of the peaks. My tasks for this hour are complete, but the vigil continues as the gloom shifts into the first grey of the approaching dawn. I carry the silence with me, a guardian of the peace that remains within these time-worn walls as I walk. The stone stairs are cold, even through the thick leather of my soles, as I ascend toward the upper reaches of the sanctuary. My footsteps create a measured, rhythmic pulse that echoes against the vaulted ceiling, a solitary beat in the profound stillness of the evening. Each landing offers a new perspective on the architecture, revealing the intricate masonry and the age-old scars left by centuries of conflict and repair. I reach the threshold of the great archives, where the atmosphere is thick with the scent of dried parchment, old ink, and the faint, sweet trace of beeswax. The doors are massive, crafted from a dark, dense wood that has resisted the warping of time and the dampness of the mountain mist. I push them open with a gentle pressure, the hinges offering only a soft, melodic groan as they yield to my entry. Inside, the library is a labyrinth of towering shelves, each one laden with the accumulated knowledge of the realm and the stories of those who came before us. My lantern light dances across the spines of thousands of books, their leather covers worn smooth by the touch of countless scholars and seekers. I walk along the narrow aisles, my eyes scanning for any volume that may have been misplaced or left open to the elements of the room. It is a quiet, meditative task, a way to honor the wisdom that remains while the rest of the environment sleeps in the shadows. I find a heavy tome resting on a small, ornate reading desk, its pages filled with delicate, flowing script and hand-painted illustrations of stars. The parchment feels thin and fragile under my fingers, like the wing of a moth. Yet it has survived the rise and fall of kingdoms. I carefully close the book, the sound of the cover meeting the pages a dull, satisfying thud that seems to ground me in the present moment. I place it back in its designated slot on the shelf, ensuring the spine is perfectly aligned with its companions. This order is a small, necessary defiance against the chaos that reigns beyond these walls, a quiet preservation of the legacy we carry. Near the center of the room, Sir Gideon's desk is cluttered with maps, scrolls, and half-finished letters, a testament to a mind that never truly rests. I do not disturb his work, for his thoughts are of a different scale than mine, focused on the grand design of the Elden Ring and the fate of the Tarnished. I merely adjust a stray ink pot that has drifted too close to the edge, feeling the cool glass and the weight of the liquid inside. A single quill lies discarded on the floor, its feather ruffled and stained with a deep midnight blue ink. I pick it up and set it back in its holder, a tiny gesture of care in a place that often feels cold and indifferent to the individual. I move toward the high balcony that overlooks the central hall, the iron railing cold and slightly damp beneath my palms. From here, the great table looks like a small glowing ember in the dimness, its light struggling to reach the furthest corners of the room. The silence is absolute, broken only by the distant, muffled resonance of the wind outside and the occasional crackle of a dying flame. I take a moment to breathe in the ambient warmth, feeling the pulse of the building as it exhales the heat of the day. The shadows below are long and distorted, stretching across the flagstones like the fingers of a giant, reaching for the light that remains. Through the high stained glass windows, the Erd tree is a shimmering pillar of gold, its brilliance softened by the haze of the midnight hours. It is a constant, silent companion to my watch, a reminder of the power that governs our lives and the beauty that persists in a broken land. The colors of the glass are vibrant even in the low light, casting deep reds and blues onto the dusty floor of the upper gallery. I walk through these pools of color, my presence a temporary flicker in the enduring history of the refuge. The air here is thin and crisp, carrying the scent of the high peaks and the distant sea, a refreshing contrast to the stuffy library. I descend a secondary staircase, the wood creaking softly under my weight as I return to the level of the main hall. My path takes me past the silent statues of heroes long forgotten, their stone faces carved with expressions of eternal resolve and quiet sorrow. I run a hand over the base of one such monument, feeling the rough texture of the granite and the cool, unyielding strength of the material. These figures are the guardians of our memory, standing watch over the empty corridors while the living dream of their own glory. I check the base for any signs of erosion or cracks, finding only the time-worn marks of age and the gentle accumulation of dust. In the corner of the hallway, a small basin of water sits on a pedestal, its surface perfectly still and reflective like a dark mirror. I dip my fingers into the liquid, the chill of it startling my skin and bringing a sudden clarity to my senses. The ripples I create spread slowly outward, distorting my reflection until the water comes to rest once more in the quiet. It is a simple primal element, yet it feels significant in the context of this storied place, a source of life and purity amidst the decay. I use a clean cloth to wipe away a stray smudge on the rim of the basin, ensuring the water remains clear for whoever might need it next. I approach the entrance to the lower kitchen, where the lingering scent of rosemary and roasted meat persists in the stillness of the night. The hearth is a pile of grey ash and glowing coals, providing a faint orange glow that illuminates the copper pots hanging from the ceiling. I check the pantry doors, ensuring they are latched against the drafts that occasionally whistle through the lower masonry. The shelves are stocked with simple, hardy fare, bags of grain, dried fruit, and jars of preserved vegetables, all neatly organized for the morning meal. It is a humble space, yet it is the heart of the hold, the place where the residents find comfort and sustenance between their journeys. I find a small spill on the stone floor near the preparation table, a dark patch of spilled wine or perhaps oil that has begun to soak into the porous rock. I kneel down, the cold of the floor seeping into my knees as I use a brush to scrub the spot away with a mixture of sand and vinegar. The work is physical and grounding, requiring a steady hand and a bit of effort to lift the stain from the time-worn surface. I do not mind the labor, for it is a way to serve the community in a manner that is tangible and immediate. When the task is done, the stone is clean and pale once more, a small victory over the messiness of daily life. As I move back toward the central chamber, I pass the door to the smithy, where the forge has finally cooled to a dull, pulsing red. The smell of iron and coal smoke is thick here, a sharp, industrial scent that speaks of hard work and the creation of tools for war. I do not enter, for Master Hugh deserves his rest, but I listen at the door for a moment, hearing only the deep, regular breathing of the smith. The anvil stands silent in the murk, its surface scarred by the thousands of blows it has received in the service of the Tarnished. It is a weighted, powerful object, a symbol of the endurance and the skill that keep this refuge standing against the tide. I check the tension of the tapestries along the main corridor, making sure they are hanging straight and are not being pulled by the hidden currents of the building. The fabric is thick and laden with the dust of the quiet hours, the intricate patterns of gold thread catching the light of my lantern. These hangings depict the history of the Golden Order, a sprawling narrative of triumph and tragedy that covers the walls of our home. I find a loose thread on the hem of one piece and carefully tuck it back into the weave, a small act of preservation for a storied artwork. The texture of the wool is rough and warm, a comforting presence in the otherwise cold stone environment. I pause by a narrow window that looks out over the misty plains below, the world beyond our walls, a sea of grey and silver under the moonlight. The distant lights of a campfire flicker in the distance, a sign of other souls struggling to find their way in the darkness of the realm. I wonder who they are and what stories they carry, whether they are friends or foes to the cause we serve here. The wind howls softly against the glass, a lonely, mournful sound that emphasizes the isolation of our mountain sanctuary. I turn away from the window, my lantern casting a wide, reassuring circle of light on the floor as I continue my rounds. I find myself back at the great table, the center of our world and the focus of all our efforts. The swords embedded in the wood are silent witnesses to the oaths taken here, their blades dull in the low light, but still sharp with purpose. I take a clean cloth and begin to polish the wooden surface of the table, my movements slow and deliberate as I work the oil into the grain. The wood is old and full of character, with knots and whorls that tell the story of the tree from which it was carved. It is a beautiful, archaic piece of furniture, a grounding force in a place that often feels untethered from the reality of the landscape. I check the candles that circle the table, trimming the wicks of those that have burned unevenly and replacing the ones that are nearly spent. The wax is warm and pliable in my hands, a soft, natural material that contrasts with the hard stone and metal of the hall. I light a new taper from the flame of my lantern, the small yellow glow spreading to join the others in a quiet dance of light. The atmosphere in the room shifts as the new candles take hold, the shadows receding slightly to reveal the intricate carvings on the legs of the table. It is a simple, repetitive task, but it brings a sense of order and peace to the late hour. I hear a faint, metallic clatter from the direction of the balcony, a sound that is out of place in the profound silence of the evening. I move toward the source of the noise, my lantern held low to avoid casting long, frightening shadows on the walls. It is only a small, decorative shield that has slipped from its mounting, its surface reflecting the golden light of the Erd tree as it rests on the floor. I pick it up, the metal cold and weighted in my hands, and carefully hang it back on its hook. I check the other mountings nearby, ensuring they are all secure and that no other accidents will occur during my watch. I walk toward the corridor that leads to the Twin Maidens, the air here growing colder and more still as I move away from the central fire. The walls are bare, and the floor is made of smooth grey tiles that reflect the light of my lantern in long, distorted streaks. I do not see the maidens, for they exist in a space that is beyond my understanding, but I feel their presence in the profound quiet of the hall. I check the iron gates that separate this wing from the rest of the hold, finding them locked and secure as they should be. The keys on my belt jingle softly as I move, a comforting, familiar resonance that marks the passage of my shift. I find a small pile of dry firewood near one of the smaller hearths and take a moment to stack it more neatly against the wall. The logs are rough and carry the scent of pine and earth, a natural grounding aroma that fills the immediate atmosphere. I arrange them by size, placing the larger pieces at the bottom to create a stable foundation for the morning fire. This small act of preparation is a gift to the person who will wake first, a way to ensure the warmth of the hold is maintained without effort. My hands are dusty from the bark, but I do not mind the grit, for it is a sign of a task well performed. I look up at the massive ceiling beams, their dark, weathered surfaces disappearing into the gloom above the reach of my lantern. They are the bones of the building, the silent strength that holds the roof over our heads and protects us from the elements. I imagine the craftsman who carved them, the labor it took to lift them into place, and the centuries they have spent in this high, lonely position. They are a measureless part of our history, a constant presence that we often take for granted in the busyness of the day. I offer a quiet word of thanks to the structure itself, a guardian of our peace in the middle of the night. I prepare to move toward the final sector of my watch, the path ahead illuminated by the first faint hint of grey in the eastern sky. My tasks for this hour are complete, the hold is secure, and the silence remains unbroken as the world begins to stir toward the dawn. I carry the weight of my keys and the light of my lantern with a sense of quiet pride, a protector of the mundane details that make this sanctuary a home. The transition from the deep gloom to the early light is a subtle, beautiful shift, a promise that the vigil is nearing its end. I walk with a steady, measured pace, ready to meet the new day with the same calm resolve I have held throughout the quiet hours. I step into the library, where the scent of old vellum and dried ink hangs thick in the atmosphere. The shelves rise high into the murk, holding secrets that have outlasted empires and dynasties alike. My lantern light dances across the spines of leather-bound volumes, their titles faded by the relentless passage of time. I reach out slowly to touch the edge of a shelf, feeling the fine, gritty layer of dust that has gathered since my last pass. Each book is a weight of history, a silent witness to the rise and fall of those who sought the throne. The wood of the shelves is dark and polished by the touch of 1,000 hands, yet it feels cold and distant in the late hour. There is a particular stillness in this room, a silence that feels earned through centuries of study and contemplation. I move toward the desk where the all-knowing usually sits, finding it cluttered with maps and half-finished scrolls. A single candle has burned down to a puddle of wax, its wick a charred remnant of a long evening's labor. I carefully scrape the hardened spill from the wood, using a small iron tool to lift the residue without scratching the surface. The wax is brittle and flakes away in small translucent chips, which I collect in the palm of my hand. This small act of maintenance preserves the integrity of the desk, ensuring it remains a fit place for the pursuit of wisdom. The maps are delicate, their edges frayed and brittle, like the wings of a moth. I smooth a curling corner of a chart depicting the fractured lands, my fingers tracing the jagged lines of a coast I will likely never see. The ink is dark and precise, a testament to the focus required to chart such a broken landscape. I place a small stone weight on the edge of the parchment, ensuring it remains flat for the scholars who will return with the light. The paper feels thin and ancient between my fingers, a fragile record of a world that is constantly shifting. I pause for a moment, listening to the faint rustle of the scrolls as they adjust to the slight movement of the air. I turn my attention to the high windows, though they look out only upon the impenetrable fog that surrounds this sanctuary. The glass is cold to the touch, and a thin veil of condensation has formed on the interior pane. I take a soft cloth from my belt and wipe the moisture away, working in slow circular motions until the glass is clear once more. It is a small task, but it keeps the rot of the damp from seeping into the wooden frames and weakening the structure. The cloth becomes damp and cool in my hand, a physical reminder of the boundary between this warmth and the void outside. I can see nothing through the pane, but the act of cleaning it provides a sense of clarity and purpose. Leaving the library, I walk along the upper balcony that overlooks the great hall. From this height, the central hearth looks like a dying ember, its glow a warm pulse against the surrounding gloom. I lean against the stone railing, the granite cool against my palms as I survey the empty space below. The statues of the old heroes stand in their alcoves, their stone faces frozen in expressions of eternal vigilance. The shadows they cast are long and distorted, stretching across the floor like reaching fingers. I feel the height of the ceiling above me, a measureless expanse of timber and shadow that seems to press down with the weight of years. I notice a slight wobble in one of the decorative balusters, a loose stone that shifts under the pressure of my hand. I make a mental note to bring a bit of mortar on my next round, or perhaps just a wooden shim to hold it steady. In a place such as this, even the smallest decay can feel like a breach in our collective armor. I move my hand away, watching the stone return to its resting place with a faint, grating noise. The sound is swallowed quickly by the vastness of the hall, leaving only the echo of my own heartbeat. It is a reminder that even the most enduring structures require constant care and attention to remain whole. Further down the walkway, I approach the area where the sorcerer rests in his chair. He is a shadow among shadows, his breathing so shallow that one might mistake him for a part of the architecture. I do not disturb him, but I check the blanket draped over his legs to ensure it has not slipped to the floor. The fabric is thick and woven with patterns that seem to shift when viewed from the corner of one's eye. I tuck the edge of the wool beneath his knee, a small gesture of care for a man who has seen too much. The texture of the blanket is rough and comforting, a mundane object in a room filled with the arcane. I find a stray quill on the floor, likely dropped by a tired hand during a moment of deep thought. I pick it up, the feather light and surprisingly sturdy, and place it on a nearby side table. There is a quiet satisfaction in returning things to their proper places, a way of maintaining order in a land defined by chaos. The hallway stretches out before me, a long corridor of arched doorways and flickering torches. Each flame is a small, defiant light, fighting against the encroaching murk of the late hour. I walk with a steady, measured pace, my shadow dancing on the walls in a slow, silent cadence. I descend the stairs toward the lower levels, where the heat of the forge still persists in the stone. Master Hugh is at rest, his massive frame hunched over his anvil, as if even in sleep he cannot leave his work. The smell of coal smoke and hot iron is a sharp contrast to the dusty aroma of the library upstairs. I walk softly, my boots making only the slightest tap on the hard-packed earth of the floor. The air here is warmer and carries the metallic tang of ground steel and burnt oil. I watch the slow rise and fall of the blacksmith's shoulders, a testament to a strength that never truly sleeps. The forge itself is a mound of grey ash, with only a few orange sparks remaining deep within the grate. I take a long iron poker and stir the coals, coaxing a final bit of warmth from the dying fire. The heat radiates outward, brushing against my face and warming the chill that has settled in my bones. It is a fierce, honest heat, the kind that speaks of hard labor and the shaping of destiny. I watch as a small flame licks at a piece of unburnt coal, a tiny flicker of life in the center of the hearth. I set the poker aside, the metal clinking softly against the stone, a solitary note in the quiet of the forge. I see the chains that bind the smith, their links polished to a dull shine by years of constant movement. I check the wall anchors, ensuring the iron is seated firmly in the masonry, and that the bolts have not loosened. It is a grim task, but the smith takes a strange comfort in the security of his bonds, a tether to his purpose. I find no fault in the metal, and I move on, leaving him to his dreams of a god-slaying weapon. The chains hang limp for now, their weight supported by the stone floor, silent and still. I run my thumb over a single link, feeling the cold, uncompromising strength of the iron. In the corner of the smithy, there is a pile of scrap metal, twisted shards of bronze and steel that were not fit for use. I sort through them briefly, looking for anything that might be sharp enough to catch a passing hem. I find a jagged piece of a broken shield and tuck it into a bin for later disposal. The metal is cold now, its temper lost, but it still carries the weight of the battle that broke it. Each fragment is a story of failure or misfortune, gathered here in the quiet of the night. I handle the pieces with care, respecting the labor that went into their original creation. I move toward the kitchen area, a small room tucked away behind the main hall. Here the smells are of dried herbs and salted meat, a domestic scent that feels out of place in this fortress of warriors. I check the water barrels, finding them nearly full, the surface of the water perfectly still, like a dark mirror. I take a small ladle and taste the liquid, finding it cool and clean, free of the bitterness of stagnant pipes. The water ripples as I lower the ladle, sending small waves that lap against the wooden sides of the barrel. It is a simple, refreshing taste, a reminder of the basic needs that bind us all together. A loaf of bread sits on the wooden table, covered by a linen cloth, to keep it from hardening in the dry atmosphere. I adjust the cloth, ensuring it covers the edges completely, protecting the sustenance of those who will wake hungry. The table is scarred with knife marks and stains, a history of 1,000 shared meals, written into the grain of the wood. I run my hand over the surface, feeling the ridges and valleys of the timber, smoothed by use. This room is the heart of the Hold's daily life, a place of nourishment and quiet conversation. I leave it as I found it, a sanctuary of the mundane, ready for the morning. I find a small lantern that has gone out, its oil reservoir empty, and its glass blackened by soot. I take a moment to refill it from a jug near the door, the golden liquid flowing in a thin, steady stream. I use a clean rag to wipe the glass, removing the grime until the interior wick is visible once more. This lantern will be ready for the kitchen staff when they arrive to begin the morning preparations. The oil has a thick, earthy smell, and a few drops spill onto my fingers, feeling slick and warm. I wipe my hands on the rag, the task complete and the lantern restored to its utility. I walk back toward the central chamber, my path taking me past the room of the two maidens. The air here is thin and tastes of ozone, a sharp metallic tang that makes the hair on my arms stand up. I do not linger, but I ensure the incense burners outside their door are still smoldering, with a low blue smoke. The fragrance is cloying and sweet, like lilies left too long in a closed room, or the scent of a tomb. It hangs in the corridor, a physical presence that marks the boundary of their domain. I breathe through my mouth to avoid the intensity of the perfume, moving quickly past the threshold. The floorboards here are old and prone to groaning under the slightest weight, so I step carefully on the beams. I have learned the layout of the creaks, the specific spots to avoid, if I wish to remain a silent observer. My pace is a slow measure, a deliberate walk that allows me to hear the subtle shifts of the building. Somewhere in the distance, a door latches shut with a soft click, a noise that echoes through the empty halls. The hold is a living thing, a collection of wood and stone that breathes in the quiet hours. I am a part of that breath, a small, moving element in the grander design of the night. I find myself back at the balcony railing, looking down at the round table itself. The swords thrust into its center are silhouettes against the dim light, their blades jagged and worn. It is a symbol of a unity that feels fragile in these late hours, a gathering of souls bound by a common, difficult goal. I stand there for a long time, watching the way the shadows stretch across the floor as the torches burn low. The table is a plane of dark wood, its surface etched with the marks of many councils. It is the anchor of this place, the point around which all our lives revolve in this strange liminal space. The silence is not empty. It is filled with the weight of the stories that inhabit these walls. Every scratch on the floor, every stain on the tapestries tells of a journey taken or a life lost. I am the curator of these small marks, the one who ensures they are not forgotten in the rush of the coming day. My lantern is a small sun in this universe of shade, a beacon of the mundane in a place of legends. I watch a single dust mote drift through the beam of my light, a tiny golden speck in the vastness of the hall. It is a moment of perfect, unhurried peace, a pause in the relentless cycle of the world. The bridge to the next hour is a narrow one, a transition from the deep tasks of the evening to the first chores of the morning. I feel the fatigue in my shoulders, a dull ache that reminds me of the hours I have spent on my feet. But there is a peace in this weariness, a sense of a shift well spent in the service of the hold. I turn my gaze toward the lower corridors where the next stage of my journey awaits, beneath the cooling stones. The path ahead is familiar, yet every night it reveals something new, a subtle detail I had previously overlooked. I step forward, my lantern swinging gently at my side, ready to continue my vigil into the deepest part of the night. The stone steps descend, spiraling into the belly of the fortress, where the foundations meet the living earth. Each footfall is a soft thud, muffled by the layer of fine dust that has gathered over many decades. I feel the temperature drop, a sharp contrast to the warmth of the main hall as the chill of the lower chambers rises to meet me. Here the stones hold the memory of the ground, a deep, unyielding cold that seeps through the soles of my boots. I move with a measured pace, my lantern casting a golden hue against the damp masonry, illuminating the cracks and the moss that clings to the mortar. It is a solitary journey, a descent into the quietest parts of the hold, where the secrets of the building are kept in the dimness. I reach the smithy, where the forge usually roars with a fierce orange life. Now it is a hollow shell of grey soot and cooling embers that give off a faint metallic scent. Master Hugh is slumped in the corner, his chains rattling faintly as he breathes, a rhythmic pulse in the silence of the workshop. I do not wake him, for his rest is hard won, and the morning will bring the hammer's strike once more. I simply check the water bucket, ensuring it is full for the first tempering of the day, the liquid reflecting the light of my flame. The anvil is a massive block of iron, scarred by 1,000 impacts, standing like a silent sentinel in the center of the room. I run my gloved hand over the face of the metal, feeling the ridges and the valleys carved by years of labor. There is a dignity in this iron, a strength that has shaped the weapons of heroes and the tools of the forgotten. Moving toward the library, the scent of old parchment and dried ink takes over the atmosphere. The shelves are packed with volumes, their leather spines cracked and peeling from the passage of many seasons. I walk the narrow aisles, my light flickering against the titles, many of which are written in tongues no longer spoken in the lands above. It is a repository of knowledge, a place where ideas go to wait for a mind to revive them. I find a discarded quill on the floor, its tip stained with a dried blue residue, and I place it back on the desk. It is a small gesture, a way of maintaining order in a place that feels increasingly disconnected from the outside world. The quiet here is different, more intellectual, as if the books themselves are whispering in their sleep. The balcony where the sorcerer rests is my next stop, a draughty ledge overlooking the void. He is a shadow among shadows, his robes blending into the masonry, his body still and contemplative. I can hear the slow, labored breath of a man who has seen too much and felt the bite of the frost in his bones. I leave a fresh candle on the small table beside him, its wick ready for the match when he finally stirs. He does not move, lost in whatever dreams the stars provide. His presence an anchor in the shifting tides of the evening. In the pantry, the supplies are dwindling, a testament to the long winter we endure in this sanctuary. I count the sacks of grain and the jars of preserved fruit, noting the numbers in my mind for the morning report. The wood of the shelves is rough and splintered, catching on my sleeve as I reach for a fallen lid. It is honest work, this inventory, a way to ground myself in the physical realities of survival. The lower foundations are damp, the stones slick with a thin film of moisture that glitters in the lantern light. I can hear the drip of water, a constant note that echoes through the narrow crawl spaces of the basement. It is the pulse of the hold, the slow infiltration of the elements into our stone sanctuary. I wipe away a trail of slime from a support beam, a minor victory against the slow decay of time. I approach the great doors that lead to the silent chamber, where the fingers reside. They are shut tight, the wood reinforced with bands of black iron, that look like they have not been moved in a century. I do not try to open them, for what lies beyond is not for my eyes, nor for my understanding. Instead, I listen to the stillness, a void that seems to pull at the edges of my perception. There is a power here, a presence that makes the hair on my neck stand up, a weight that is not entirely physical. I retreat to the corridor, my lantern casting long, dancing shapes against the walls as I move back toward the light. The fatigue is a physical presence now, pressing down on my shoulders and slowing my gait. I have walked many miles within these few hundred feet, a journey measured in tasks rather than distance. The evening is reaching its zenith, the point where the hours blur into one another. I find a small alcove and sit for a moment, resting my head against the cold masonry of the wall. The silence is a blanket, wrapping around me, and dulling the sharp edges of my thoughts. I close my eyes, just for a minute, letting the ambient hum of the building wash over me. It is a brief respite, a chance to gather my strength for the final watch of my shift. The stones beneath me are steady, a foundation that has stood for ages and will likely stand long after I am gone. I think of the many who have sat where I sit, seeking a moment of peace in the middle of their duties. We are a lineage of shadows, the caretakers of the quiet, the ones who keep the flame burning when all others have gone to rest. My breath is a soft mist in the cool atmosphere of the lower levels, a sign of life in a place of stone. I stand up, my joints popping with the effort, and prepare to return to the upper floors. The walk back to the main hall will be slow, a gradual climb toward the light of the coming day. I take one last look at the corridor, ensuring every lock is secure and every shadow is in its place. The order is maintained, the silence is preserved, and the hold is safe for another hour. The stairs are steeper on the way up, or perhaps it is just my tired legs protesting the climb. I use the railing for support, the wood smooth and polished by the hands of 1,000 workers. Each step is a conscious effort, a deliberate movement toward the completion of my vigil. I am a clock, marking the passage of time with my very presence, a human counter to the eternal stone. I reach the landing and pause to catch my breath, looking out over the central chamber. The main hall is still dim, but the quality of the light has changed, becoming thinner and more translucent. The first hint of the coming day is a pale grey creeping through the high windows of the dome. It is not yet dawn, but the transition has begun, the slow shift from the deep hours to the early morning. I walk past the table once more, its surface now visible in the growing grey light. The swords look less like threats and more like relics, the tools of a trade that is momentarily suspended. I feel a sense of accomplishment, a quiet pride in the work I have done throughout the long night. I have kept the watch, and the hold has remained a sanctuary for those who sleep within its walls. The bridge to the final hour is almost crossed, and I can sense the change in the air. I can see the kitchen staff beginning to stir in the distance, the first sounds of life returning to the building. My role as the sole inhabitant of the silence is coming to an end, and I welcome the company. I move toward the final station, where I will hand over the keys and the responsibility of the watch. The atmosphere is fresher here, a cool breeze blowing through the open archways of the balcony. I take a deep breath, filling my lungs with the scent of the morning and the promise of a new day. It is a fresh start for the Hold, and for all those who dwell within its protective embrace. My journey is nearly over, but the cycle will continue, a never-ending pattern of service and care. I see the first cook entering the pantry, his footsteps brisk and purposeful, breaking the long silence. We nod to each other, a silent acknowledgement of our shared labor and the passing of the torch. The transition is seamless, a movement from the stillness of the night to the activity of the morning. I am ready to rest, to find my own corner of the Hold and drift into a well-earned sleep. The final steps are the easiest, a gentle slope toward the end of my shift as the first light of dawn begins to touch the stones. The kitchen is a place of copper and steam, where the cool morning light meets the residual warmth of the ovens. I walk past the large hearth, where the embers from the previous evening still glow with a faint orange heart. A single apprentice is already there, scrubbing a massive iron pot with a bundle of stiff straw. The scraping is a sharp, crisp noise, cutting through the lingering stillness of the building. I move toward the pantry, where the smell of dried herbs and salted meats is most potent. Bunches of roa fruit hang from the rafters, their red skins wrinkled and concentrated with sugar. I check the inventory list pinned to the door, a piece of parchment that has been folded and unfolded 100 times. The ink is faded, but the names of the supplies are still legible in the dim morning haze. The pantry shelves are lined with jars of pickled turtleneck and dried mushrooms, each one labeled in a neat, cramped hand. I run my fingers along the glass, feeling the cold smoothness of the containers. The weight of the jars is reassuring, a physical manifestation of the Hold's preparation and resilience. I make a small mark on my own ledger, noting that the stores are sufficient for the coming day. Leaving the kitchen behind, I walk through the narrow corridor that leads toward the smithy. The atmosphere is cooler here, the stone walls leaching the warmth from the atmosphere as I move further from the hearth. I can hear the distant, rhythmic clink of metal on metal, a sign that the master smith is already at his task. It is a persistent, steady tone, a pulse that beats at the very center of this sanctuary. The smithy is a cavernous space, filled with the scent of coal, smoke, and hot iron. Master Hugh is a silhouette against the forge, his muscular arms moving with a grace that belies his size. He does not look up as I pass, his focus entirely on the glowing piece of steel on his anvil. The sparks fly in every direction, tiny stars that burn out before they hit the soot-covered floor. I stop for a moment to watch him work, mesmerized by the sheer physicality of his labor. Each strike of the hammer is precise, a testament to decades of practice and a deep understanding of the medium. The iron is malleable in his hands, shifting and changing shape with every blow. It is a transformation of raw material into something of purpose and utility, a process that mirrors the growth of the Tarnished themselves. On the floor around the anvil, there are piles of iron shavings and discarded scraps of metal. I use a small broom to sweep them into a neat pile, a minor task that helps to maintain the order of the workspace. The metal is cool to the touch, the edges sharp and jagged. I'm careful not to cut myself, my movements slow and deliberate in the half-light. The transition from the smithy to the library is a shift from the physical to the intellectual. The library is a place of quiet contemplation, where the only noise is the rustle of turning pages and the soft scratching of a quill. Sir Gideon is seated at his desk, surrounded by stacks of books and scrolls that seem to grow higher with every passing hour. He is a man of immense knowledge, his mind a repository of the lore and history of the lands between. I walk past the shelves, my eyes scanning the titles of the volumes that line the walls. There are books on alchemy, astrology, and the storied arts of combat, each one a window into a different aspect of this universe. The smell of old paper and leather is thick in the atmosphere, a comforting scent that speaks of wisdom and the passage of time. I find a stray scroll that has fallen from a shelf and carefully return it to its proper place. The desk is covered in maps and diagrams, many of them annotated with Gideon's own observations. I see a map of the Leonia of the lakes, the blue ink shimmering in the pale light of the morning. There are markings indicating the locations of glintstone mines and the ruins of time-worn academies. It is a landscape of mystery and danger, a place where the line between reality and magic is often blurred. I move toward the balcony that overlooks the central chamber, the height providing a different perspective on the whole. From here, I can see the intricate carvings on the pillars and the way the light plays across the surface of the great table. The swords of the fallen heroes are like silent sentinels, their blades reflecting the grey light of the dawn. It is a place of memory and honor, a sanctuary for those who have given everything in service of the Order. The balcony railing is cold under my hands, the stones smooth and polished. I look out over the sprawling landscape that lies beyond the walls of the hold. The Erd tree, a golden beacon in the distance. Its light is softer now, filtered through the morning mist that clings to the ground. The environment is quiet, the only movement the slow drift of the clouds across the sky. I descend the stairs to the lower level, where the guest chambers are located. The doors are all closed, the occupants still lost in the depths of their sleep. I walk softly, my boots making no noise on the thick carpets that line the hallway. There is a sense of peace here, a quiet that is both profound and fragile. I check each door, ensuring that they are all securely latched and that no shadows linger in the corners. I reach the room that belongs to Fear, the deathbed companion, and pause for a moment outside her door. The scent of lavender and old silk wafts from beneath the frame, a gentle reminder of her presence. She is a figure of mystery and controversy, her role in the hold both essential and misunderstood. I move on my task to observe and protect, not to judge or interfere. At the end of the hallway, there is a large mirror, its frame carved with images of intertwined vines and flowers. I catch a glimpse of my own reflection, a tired but determined figure in the dim light. My eyes are dark with exhaustion, but there is a steady light within them, a reflection of the purpose that drives me. I am a part of this place, a small but vital gear in the machinery of the hold. I pass an armor stand, the plate mail gleaming with a dull silver sheen. It is a suit of armor that belonged to a knight of the old order, its surface etched with the symbols of his house. I run a cloth over the metal, removing the fine layer of dust that has accumulated during the evening. The armor is a reminder of the cost of war and the sacrifices that are made in the name of duty. I return to the main hall, the center of the Hold's activity. The light is stronger now, the grey of the dawn giving way to a pale, watery yellow. The first of the Tarnished are beginning to wake, their voices a low murmur in the distance. My shift is almost over, the long hours of the watch coming to a close. I feel a sense of relief, a release of the tension that has been my constant companion throughout the evening. I walk toward the final station, a small alcove near the main entrance. Here I will record the final entries in my ledger and prepare to hand over my responsibilities. The atmosphere is fresher here, a cool breeze blowing through the open archway. I take a deep breath, the scent of the morning filling my lungs and clearing the cobwebs from my mind. I see the relief guard approaching, his footsteps steady and purposeful. We exchange a few words, a brief summary of the evening's events, and any issues that need to be addressed. He takes the keys from my hand, his grip firm and reassuring. The transition is complete. The watch passed from one set of hands to another in a measureless cycle of service. I turn and walk toward my own quarters, my steps lighter now that my duty is done. The Hold is waking up. The silence of the evening replaced by the sounds of a new day. I look back one last time, seeing the first rays of the sun touching the top of the Erd tree. It is a beautiful sight, a reminder of the hope that persists even in the face of the most daunting challenges. I am ready to rest, to find my own sanctuary in the quiet corners of the Hold as the morning light begins to fill every room. The stone beneath my boots feels cooler now, as if the very foundation of the Hold is exhaling the stored warmth of the previous day. I pass through the archway leading to the residential wing, where the shadows are retreating into the corners. My muscles ache with a familiar dull throb, a physical record of the miles walked within these circular walls. To my left, the great table stands in a state of suspended animation, its rough-hewn timber catching the first true gold of the morning. No one sits there now, the ghosts of past champions seemingly departed with the arrival of the sun. The silence here is different than it was 3 hours ago. It is expectant rather than pressing. I notice a single forgotten cup resting on the edge of the bench, a small stain of dried mead at its base. It is a mundane relic of a conversation I did not hear, a life I only guard from the periphery. I leave it where it is, for the morning servants will find it soon enough. The hallway leading to my quarters is narrow, the walls lined with tapestries that have lost their color to the centuries. I run my fingers along the threads, feeling the coarse texture of the weave and the dust that clings to the fibers. Each stitch represents a story, a history that is slowly being swallowed by the quiet of the Hold. I reach the door to my room, the wood old and silvered, the iron handle cold against my palm. It turns with a soft metallic click, a noise that signals the end of my public duty and the start of my private rest. The room inside is small, barely larger than a monk's cell, but it is mine. A single window, little more than a slit in the thick masonry, provides a view of the sprawling city below. The Leyndell ramparts are shifting into a glow, the white stone reflecting the brilliance of the Erd tree's grace. It is a sight that never fails to stir a sense of awe, even in my weary state. I move to the wash basin, the water within it still and clear, reflecting the pale light of the morning. I splash my face. The chill of the liquid, a sharp contrast to the lingering heat of my skin. It washes away the grime of the watch, the soot from the torches, and the phantom weight of the shadows. My fingers fumble slightly as I unbuckle the leather straps of my breastplate, the metal clicking as it is released. I lay the piece of armor on the wooden stand, its surface dull and pitted from years of service. It is a weighted garment, one that I am glad to be rid of for a few hours. The gauntlets follow, placed side by side like twin sentinels on the small table. My hands feel strangely light without them, the skin pale and marked by the pressure of the steel. I rub my knuckles, feeling the blood return to the joints with a tingling warmth. I sit on the edge of the cot, the straw mattress creaking under my weight in a slow, measured groan. The blankets are coarse wool, smelling of cedar and old wool, a scent that I have come to associate with safety. I take a moment to simply breathe, listening to the muffled noises of the hold waking up. Somewhere in the distance, a hammer strikes an anvil, a solitary note that rings through the stone. It is Master Hugh, his work never truly finished, his prisoner's task a constant in this shifting landscape. The cadence of his labor is a comfort, a sign that the order of things remains intact. I think of the Tarnished who will soon be passing through these halls, their hearts full of ambition and fire. They seek the throne, the ring, the power to reshape the environment according to their will. I am merely the one who ensures they have a quiet place to return to, a sanctuary in the storm. The light in the room is growing stronger, the pale yellow turning to a vibrant amber as the sun rises higher. It illuminates the dust motes dancing in the atmosphere, a miniature galaxy swirling in the wake of my movements. I watch them for a time, lost in the simple beauty of their chaotic dance. I reach for the small journal that sits on the bedside table, its leather cover worn smooth by my touch. I do not write in it every day, but this morning feels significant, the end of a particularly long and thoughtful watch. I pick up the quill, the feather soft against my cheek. I record only a few words, a brief mention of the silence and the way the light hit the Erd tree. My handwriting is shaky, the letters leaning to the right as my hand tires. It is a modest record, a tiny fragment of a life spent in the service of a grander purpose. I close the book and set it aside, the task complete. My eyes are growing laden, the pull of sleep becoming an irresistible force that drags at my consciousness. I lie back on the cot, the pillow firm and cool against the back of my head. The ceiling of my room is made of rough-hewn beams, the wood dark with age and smoke. I trace the patterns of the grain with my eyes, seeing shapes and figures in the knots and whorls. It is a familiar landscape, one that I have explored many times in the moments before sleep. The noises of the hold are fading now, replaced by the steady pulse of my own heartbeat. I feel the tension leaving my body, starting at my toes and moving upward until every muscle is at rest. The environment outside is no longer my concern. The watch has been passed. I think of the grace that guides us all, that golden thread that binds the broken pieces of this land together. It is a flickering light, sometimes bright and blinding, sometimes a mere ember in the dimness. But it is always there, a promise of something more than this endless cycle of death and rebirth. I close my eyes, and the amber light of the room fades into a soft, velvety grey. The last thing I hear is the distant murmur of the wind, a gentle sigh that carries the scent of the sea and the promise of a quiet rest. I drift into the stillness, the watch finally over, and the morning fully embraced. Thank you for spending this evening with me. Until next time on Canon and Calm, sleep well.